Okay. So, how's everybody doing? Okay. Okay, good. So today we're just gonna continue just mentioning very quickly what we started from chapter 24, and we're going to continue and hopefully conclude chapter 24. As I mentioned last time, chapter 24 is concluding, is basically the last of the first half of the book. And it's not only in terms of the numbers of chapters, which is pretty much the half of the book, but it's also in terms of the book is divided to the prophecies prior to destruction of the temple and afterwards. Yeah, of course, it's the first temple. Okay, so and we said that the first prophecy is very, very clear. It gives a very particular date. The date is Asara B'Tevet, and we spoke about that. And why this is significant? Because Yechzkel is commanded to make sure that people understand historically for future generations that this was the point of no return. This is the date, the exact date on which the siege on Yerushalayim started. And that was the beginning of the end. Now, so we're going to look now at verses 3, 4, and 5. This is the first prophecy in the chapter. There are two prophecies in the chapter. This is the easier one. 3, 4, and 5. Chapter 24, verses Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Umeshol el beit hameri mashal, ואמרת עליהם, כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, שפוט הסיר שפוט, וגם יצוק בו מים, אסוף נתחיה אליה, כל נתח טוב ירך וחטף, מבחר עצמים מלא. מבחר הצאן לקוח, וגם דור העצמים תחתיה, רתח רתחיה, גם בשלו עצמיה בתוכה. Tell a parable to the rebellious house. Say to them, thus said Hashem, set the pot, set it, and also pour water into it. Gather its cuts into it, all the good cuts, thigh and shoulder. Fill it with the choicest bones. Take the choicest of the flock and also arrange the bones at its bottom. Then boil it well so that even its bones becomes cooked within it. Okay. Atzamim, it's interesting, it's basically it's atzamot, okay? It's bones, okay? Fine. And we're talking about two types of bones here, right? We're talking about the bones that you can eat, or whatever. Some people like to suck on bones or whatever, eat the bones. You put them in the pot and they're cooked. And the bones that you cannot eat are placed under the pot as a burning material.
Like asbestos.
Yeah, it's like whatever, something that you burn. Okay. So the parable describes something. You take a pot and you put the good pieces of meat inside and you put it on the fire to cook the meat and the bones. Okay. If you remember in chapter 11, there was a parable similar to that. Right? When he says, Hi hasir v'anachnu habasar, that the people of Yerushalayim says, no, Yerushalayim is going to protect us. We are the meat and Yerushalayim is the sir. Just like the pot protects the meat from getting burned, so the city is going to protect us from the enemy. And of course, Yechezkel says to them, that's not going to happen. It's not only that the Yerushalayim is not going to be a pot for you, but you're not going to be, but you're going to be also the meat that's going to get burned. Okay. Here he says something else. But before he says it, he explained why God is so angry with Yerushalayim. Okay? Before he tells them what's going to happen, he tells them why. So let's take a look at verses 6, 7, and 8. לכן, כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, אוי עיר הדמים, סיר אשר חלאתה בה וחלאתה לא יצאה ממנה, לנתחיה הוציאה, לא נפל עליה גורל. כי דמה בתוכה היה, על צחיח סלע שמת הוא, לא שפחת הוא על הארץ, לכסות עליו עפר. להעלות חמה למקום נקם, נתתי אדמה על צחיח סלע לבלתי הכסות. Therefore, thus said Hashem, woe, O city of bloodshed, the pot in which there is filth, whose filth has not gone out of it. Empty it cut by cut. No lot has been cast over it, for the blood was within her. She placed it upon a smooth rock. She did not pour it upon the ground to cover it with dirt, so that it might stir up my wrath to take vengeance. I have placed her blood upon the smooth rock, that it not be covered. Okay, Yerushalayim is that pot that is full of chel'ah. Okay, it's the only time, by the way, that we find that word in Tanakh. In modern Hebrew, we are familiar with that word. With Radak and Rashi say zuhama, filth. That's the way the article also describe it. Okay, I think in modern Hebrew it's slightly different. It's
something not pleasant.
No, obviously filth. Yeah, but chelain in modern Hebrew it's even in the next. It's something that is it's some sort of something that we're disgusted with. Right? Yeah, but okay. So what we're saying is that the filth that in Yerushalayim did not leave the city yet. And therefore, the city is doomed. And the sin that he is talking about as the reason for that punishment is the bloodshed, shfichut damim. Now,
And the blood is not covered.
Of course, and that we're going to get into that in a second. There's an interesting term in Pasuk Zayin and Pasuk Chet, Tzechiach Sela. Okay? Tzechiach Sela. No. So Rashi has, it means it's the smooth part of the rock. It's like you have rock and you have like bumpy areas and you have like smooth. So that's the Radak says it's a higher place on the rock that is not covered. So it's like, the rock is covered, but there's like part of it the highest part of it that is still exposed. And the Mitzudot, the Baal Mitzudot says that Tzechiach Sela comes from the word Tzechiach, i.e. dry, like a desert. Okay? So, interesting. So he says, Ki dama betocha haya al Tzechiach Sela. Because the blood was on that Tzechiach Sela. Either it was on the highest place or it was on a dry place. This is why the blood stayed. Or, according to Rashi, it's smooth. And perhaps because of that, it was not absorbed into the rock.
Blood should be covered, like buried.
We'll get to that in a second. So this is exactly the point. Shoshana is right, and I think Hannah said the same idea. The blood has to be covered. So this idea that blood, and specifically bloodshed, murder, is something that we see throughout Tanakh and in the Torah in several places. If you remember the first murder, Cain and Hevel, it's already called me achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama. Right? The blood is calling me from the earth. That's number one. The Torah says that if a murder is not going to be judged, then the blood is going to continue defiling the land. כי האדם הוא יחניף את הארץ, ולארץ לא יכופר לדם אשר שופך בה כי אם בדם שופכו.
That's why we cover bodies.
That's a little bit different because we're talking about blood and that's an interesting observation. We're going to get into that. Just give me a second. Covering the blood with earth, with dirt, is an attempt to cover the murder, the killing. Now, even if it's permissible, so for example, in the laws of shchita, we're supposed to cover the blood. Yes, you're allowed to shech the chicken, but you need to cover the blood. Just a sec, Shoshana.
I'm so sorry. Where are we? Where in Ezekiel are we reading? What number? Please.
Chapter 24. And we are on verses 7, 8, 9.
Okay, thank you.
But also when it comes to the murder of Cain, the murder of Hevel, it says, the Torah says to Cain, "V'ata arurata min ha'adama asher patzta et pia lakachat et demei achicha meyadecha." Demei from the word dam. Yeah. So when there's blood, you're supposed to cover it with the dirt. However, that act by itself, it's supposed to, move you to the next stage or whatever. But if the murderer is not being punished, it is as if the blood was not covered. Like the blood is still demanding justice. Yes, Shoshana.
It's the same. You have to bury a body, but you have also to bury the blood because had blood who had nefesh. It was
correct
receptacle for the nefesh, but it's
correct. Correct. So we buried the body because because the body was came from earth and will return to the earth. But the blood is the nefesh, and that has to be covered by the earth as well. But this idea of the blood that was not covered and demanding justice is, for example, Iyov says, "Eretz al techasi dami ve'al yehi makom leza'akati." Right? And since Yerushalayim did not do justice and did not punish the murderers, it is so Yerushalayim is like this murderer who committed the murder but did not cover the blood. And by doing that, so Yerushalayim prevented the kapara, the atonement, by Yerushalayim is the one to blame. Not only that you murdered, but you also prevented the kapara. No, that's different. That's different. That's the interest. Like, you because you murder for a particular reason, so you're going to benefit from it. Here, there's no benefit.
They don't know what their actions.
No, but it's just, there's no benefit.
So why are they killing?
Why? Why people kill?
I don't know. I wouldn't.
Exactly. This is why you're here and not in prison. Okay. Okay. What's the interesting part is that God says, I'm not going to cover that blood. I'm not going to do it for you. It's going to stay exposed and, so to say, to remind and kind of and demand that revenge. Right? Remember that blood is going to stay on that high place, on that place that, right? The tzchia chasela. Leviltihi kasot. So it's not covered. Okay, now the Navi, now Yechzkel is going to go back. Remember, we have a pot with meat on the fire. So have to go back to the kitchen. Yeah, Cholent, exactly. And we have to go back to that. So verses 9 through 13. לכן, כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, אוי עיר הדמים, גם אני אגדיל המדורה. הרבה עצים הדלק האש, התם הבשר, והרקח המרקחה, והעצמות יחרו, והעמידיה על גחליה הריקה, למען תחם וחרה נחושתה, וניתחה בתוכה טומאתה, תיתום חלאתה, טעונים הלאת, ולא תצא ממנה רבת חלאתה, באש חלאתה. בטומאתך זימה יען תהרתיך ולא טהרת, מטומאתך לא תטהרי עוד, עד הניחי את חמתי בך. Therefore, thus said Hashem, woe, O city of bloodshed, I too will enlarge the fire. I don't know what that is. The fire.
Yeah.
The fire. Increase the wood, kindle the fire, consume the meat, and mix this, the spices, so the bones become scorched, and then stand it empty upon its coals, so that its bottom becomes hot and scorched. Its contamination melted within it, its filth consumed. She has become weary with her deceptions, thus her abundant filth cannot come out of it. Only by fire can her filth be purged. You remain in your licentious contamination. Because I tried to cleanse you, but you would not be cleansed. You will not again be cleansed of your contamination until I place my wrath upon you. Hashem have spoken, it is coming, and I shall carry it out. I will not hinder, I will not pity, I will not relent. They have judged you according to your ways and according to your deeds, the word of the Lord Hashem. Oh, I did already 14. Just a sec, so Pasuk 14, the Hebrew is, אני אדוני דיברתי, בא ועשיתי, לא אפרע ולא אחוס ולא אנחם, כי דרכייך וכעלילותייך שפתוך נאום אדוני אלוהים. That's the end of that part. But basically, just a second, he's saying is that illusion of the pot, that bubble is going to burst now. Meaning, the fire under the pot is going to increase. The meat is going to be cooked all the way. It's going to be actually overcooked, and everything in the pot is going to burn. Then it's going to be the empty pot is going to stay on the coals,
until it.
And the pot itself is going to burn.
Yeah, it melts.
Yeah. Which is a parable to the burning of the city itself. And that's the only way where the filth, that chil'ah, is going to be purified or go away. Okay, and all that stuff starts immediately on that day, i.e. Asar B'Tevet, the beginning of the chapter. And he says, Ani Adonai dibarti ba ve'asiti lo efra. Again, we have a machloket about what exactly it means, lo efra. So according to Radak, lo ashuv achor mima shegazarti, that means I'm not going to retract, I'm not going to change, go back to what I have said before. Rashi says, lo efara, lo abatel gzerati. It's similar. I'm not going to reverse the decree. It's a payment. Of course it is. Okay. So this is, now we come to the second prophecy, which is extremely, extremely difficult on many, many levels. Yeah. Where do you see it? On Pasuk what? Pasuk Yudbet. Te'unim hel'at. Yeah, very difficult one also.
Is it like Ta'un with a tet?
Become
in ayin?
Te'unim. She has become weary with her deceptions. Weary with her deceptions. I have to look into that.
It looks like Ta'un.
No. No. No.
Lots of seeds in it and all kind of things that could spring out of it.
Maybe. I don't think so. Okay, let's. I'll find that. I want to go to the second prophecy that's going to take us till the end of class today. It's very difficult. It's very difficult also from a theological perspective. Yechzkel is commended on something symbolic, but that something is connected to something else that is completely horrible, and from a theological perspective is very, very difficult. He's basically commanded not to mourn for the death of his wife. If you remember, when we had hidden women in the Bible many years ago, one of the classes we talked about that, the death of Yechezkel's wife. Let's take a look at the psukim. We're going to do verses 15 through 18. What? That's okay. I kind of like didn't remember it myself when I looked at it. So, I mean, there's not much to discuss about it. It's just, we'll see. וידבר אדוני אלי לאמור, 15. בן אדם, הנני לוקח ממך את מחמד עיניך במגפה, ולא תספוד ולא תבכה ולא תבוא דמעתך. הענק דום מתים אבל לא תעשה, פארך חבוש עליך ונעליך תשים ברגליך ולא תעטה על שפם, ולחם אנשים לא תאכל. ואדבר אל העם בבוקר ותמות אשתי בערב, ואעש בבוקר כאשר צוויתי. In order to do that symbolic thing that he is commanded to do, i.e. not to mourn, his wife needs to die. And when that happens...
Is that a kind of tziduk hadin?
No. And then what when that happens, he's not going to observe any of the customs of mourning. A couple of words that before we go into discussing that. A couple of words, just of the language. So he says, He'anek dom, okay. He'anek is from he'anacha, yeah, kind of a sigh. Okay, so that means you cannot sigh and express your mourning like others. And then pe'ercha chavosh alecha. Pe'er is no, in the biblical Hebrew and also the halachic language is pe'ercha chavosh alecha. That's a mitznefet, or basically a hat, and that's the custom that somebody is mourning does not wear a hat. You don't wear a hat because that gives significance. It's an article of clothing that gives, fancy. It's significant. So when you're in mourning, you don't wear a hat. You're going to wear shoes. From that, Chazal learned that one of the things that in mourning you don't wear shoes. Then he says, "Velechem anashim lo tochel." Right? That means, "Velechem anashim lo tochel." But from that, the Chazal learned that in the Shiva, and especially the first Sudat Havra'ah, after the funeral, custom is that you're not eat your own food, but rather somebody brings you food, and that's part of the custom that we have, that people bring food during Shiva.
But here is the opposite.
No, but that's the meaning. Velechem anashim lo tochel. So let's go back into this idea. Is it possible that somebody is going to die just to be a symbol, just to make a point? Somebody's going to die. I mean, this is crazy. This is not. And Yechezkel needs to suffer so much because of this role that he has to be the prophet. It says, Mahmad Einecha, the apple of your eye. So here's the pshat, the way I like to look at that. Okay, the pshat. Look at the pasuk. The pasuk that 16 says, "Ben Adam inini lokech mucha et machmad einecha b'mageifa," in the plague. It means there was a plague. She was destined to die in the plague anyway. So that, for whatever reason, right? There's a plague, people die. What Yechezkel is commanded to do is not that she's going to die because of his role. It's nothing to do with that. She's going to die because she's going to die. That's the decree. And it has nothing to do with him. That's the plague. What happens later on, that's what God tells him. She's going to die. That's a fact. What I want from you has nothing to do with her death. What I want from you is not to mourn for her. It's difficult, but that's the only way I can explain that. I have no other, because if I'm not going to explain it that way, then from a theological perspective, we have a huge problem. Now,
just as an example, the severity of this is so strong. So this is why he's explaining it.
No, I get it. And indeed, this very unusual behavior brings the people to ask. Look at Pasuk 19. ויאמרו אלי העם, הלא תגיד לנו, מה אלה לנו כי אתה עושה? The people said to me, won't you tell us what these acts that you are doing mean to us, for us? What are you doing? Now we're going to understand the symbolism behind his behavior. I'm going to read verses 20 to 24. ואומר עליהם, דבר אדוני היה אלי לאמור. אמור לבית ישראל, כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, הנני מחלל את מקדשי גאון עוזכם, מחמד עיניכם ומחמל נפשכם ובניכם ובנותיכם אשר עזבתם בחרב יפולו. ועשיתם כאשר עשיתי על שפם לא תעטו ולחם אנשים לא תאכלו, ופריכם על ראשיכם ונעליכם ורגליכם לא תספדו ולא תבכו, ונמוקותם בעוונותיכם, ונהמתם איש אל אחיו. והיה יחזקאל לכם למופת, ככל אשר עשה תעשו בבואיו, ידעתם כי אני אדוני אלוהים. So I said to them, the word of Hashem came to me saying, say to the house of Israel, thus said Hashem, behold, I am profaning my sanctuary, the bride of your strength, the darling of your eyes, and the yearning of your soul, and your sons and daughters, whom you have left behind, will fall by the sword. And you will do as I have done. You will not veil yourselves. Veiling, that was also a custom of mourning in the old days. We don't do that anymore. To the lips, and you will not eat the bread, thank you, of other people. Your headgear will be upon your heads, and your shoes upon your feet. You shall not lament, and you shall not weep, and you will pine away because of your iniquities. And each of you will moan to his brother. Ezekiel will be a sign for you. You will be according to everything that he has done. And when this comes to pass, you will know that I am Hashem. So Yechezkel's wife is the parable for the temple. Why this is significant? The rabbis later on in the times of the Talmud are going to take it to the next step. And they say, based on this pasuk, that the person that loses his wife is just like the destruction of the temple. And a woman loses her husband, it's the same thing. Losing a spouse is like this complete, okay. And then he goes and he says, like the sons and daughters that are remain. So Bnei Israel, the Jews, are not going to mourn. They're not going to observe all the customs of mourning for the loss of the temple and for the loss of their children.
This is something that it's very hard.
Of course it is hard.
So they had any feelings or something that disappeared.
You'll see. So that's exactly the question. Why they're not going to mourn, right?
But we do mourn today.
So Rashi, just a sec. So Rashi gives two explanations. One, he said, you're not going to mourn because there's no mourning if everybody's in mourning. If there's nobody to console you, then there's no mourning. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's going to lose their kids. So there's no consoling. And because there's no consoling, there's no mourning. I mean, they're going to feel all that stuff, But it's not going to be in the context of mourning. You got to understand something. All those customs, all that stuff that we observe, even today, the customs of mourning, it's because of what? The people around us. It's the people, yes. No. Obviously. But you want to tell me something. If you lose some, God forbid, you lose somebody, you want to tell me that if you're going to wear leather shoes or not, it's going to make any difference in your private way of mourning, in the way psychologically you deal with that? No. But wearing leather shoes means business, right? Means, I'm part of society, I'm going out, I'm doing things. And that's not what I'm doing during mourning. During mourning, I'm removing myself from all that stuff. I'm staying home. I'm secluding myself from society, right? In that sense, society comes to me, right? But so it's a symbol. It's a symbol, right? Same goes for all the other stuff. So the practices that we have even today in terms of mourning, Shiva, the whole thing, were developed because we live in this world, because we live in a society. And if, God forbid, somebody's in mourning, the others come to console that person, that family. But if everybody is like that, there's nobody to come and console you. There's no, if everybody's sitting, if everybody's lost somebody, so what's the point of and by the way, we heard stories like that from the Holocaust. But everybody was like in mourning all the time.
It's a psychological thing too.
Obviously. But I'm saying that if you're going to sit on the floor, or you're going to sit in a regular chair, it's not going to make any difference to you in terms of your ability to digest and right? It's not. And by the way, most of the customs of mourning is when it comes to parhesia, to in public. Why don't we, one of the big enigmas of mourning is Shabbat, right? All of a sudden, there's Shabbat, there's no, what are you talking about? Oh, so it's not that there's no mourning, but there's no mourning in public. Okay, because you can't, so it's all about, right, and the psychological impact of that is whether you like it or not. The fact that you are starting a process of mourning is what enables you to, at some point, move on and put it behind you. As terrible as it is, tragedy, whatever that is. Okay, so it's almost like it's forced on you. But it's an interesting question. What happens to a person who's on a deserted island? I'm just like thinking now. What happens to somebody who's a deserted, from halachic perspective? Somebody who's on a deserted island and is in mourning. Do they need to observe all those halachot of mourning? I'm not so sure. Because there's nobody there. But I'm saying I'm talking about those external acts of shoes or whatever. It's an interesting question. Yes, Shoshana. Yeah, just a second. Shoshana?
All these mourning things are also continuing some way in Shloshim. And in the beginning, in Shloshim.
Correct.
Shloshim. And in the beginning, before it became modern to wear the 3 or 4 day beard, I was startled if a man came to me with a beard like that. I said, I hope that no one died in your family. I mean, really,
well, that's fashion. I have like a little bit of beard. My mom.
You understand what happened to me?
Yeah, I get it.
A symbol. something happened to the sky.
It is a symbol. You're right. It is a symbol, and that's the way society looks at that. Okay, so first explanation. Yes, Beth.
Two things. It kind of harkens me back to the story of Aaron's two sons, where God said,
Yes.
"Don't mourn," but everybody else will mourn for you. Kind of, so they had other people, but so it was kind of a different circumstance, but it was the same kind of thing. Don't mourn, except how do you tell someone to not mourn? And I think all those external things are helpful to the person who's in mourning.
Absolutely.
You do, it isn't that it's just the people around you, but the things you do at a time when you think you can't breathe or put one foot in front of the other, or that you're barely alive, you still have things you have to do or not do because God said to. So I think it's sort of, if you're the only one, it's still helpful to observe them, but.
Okay. Just a tiny remark that when it comes to the sons of Aaron, it's not that they're commanded not to mourn, they're commanded to pause at that point. To continue, show must go on, they're going to mourn, but later on. So it's not to mourn, but it's to pause that process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, that's important thing. Okay, so Rashi said, first explanation of Rashi was, it's everybody's going to be in mourning, and therefore there's no real mourning. This is why they're not really in mourning, because everybody is going to experience a loss. And the second explanation that Rashi provides is, you would want to mourn, but you're going to be so afraid of the kasdim, of the enemy, that you're not going to have courage to do that. Think about it. When the enemy comes and attacks, it's not only physical, it's also spiritual, right? Why did it destroy Beit HaMikdash? It's just a building, right? It's a symbol. Why didn't let the Jews keep Shabbat or what? Who cares? Or kashrut or all that kind of stuff. Why all that stuff? Because that's an attack on the psyche. Okay?
It's an attack on our way of life.
Correct. So what I'm saying, so that's what Rashi says. You're going to be so afraid that you're not going to have the courage even to act, I guess, whatever, religious expression, and that mourning is religious expression, or at least those particular acts of mourning. Okay, so here's the problem that I have with Rashi's explanation. What are we talking about? The Bnei Israel, okay, I get it, that's for people, Yerushalayim, that might be applicable because they're going to be attacked by the enemy. But they said that they're going to be just like Yechzkel. But Yechzkel, where is Yechzkel? He's already in Bavel. He's not being attacked by the enemy. So why? See, so we have a problem with that.
But it's always bringing it to everyone.
I get it, but they're gonna say we're just like Yechzkel. So if Yechzkel couldn't mourn, now we understand why we can't. But Yechzkel was not attacked by anyone. He was already in Bavel. So that explanation that they're going to be so afraid of the enemy somehow doesn't sit with me.
But the difference that he's mentioning is why. So he's probably thinking that maybe something could happen to him. He will have to mourn regardless if he could.
Obviously.
Or not.
Obviously. I get it. I get it. But I'm saying, like, I think that there's something deeper here. Okay? There's something deeper here. What happens when I perform those practices of mourning? Okay, I'm releasing. Okay. I'll take it another step, Maxine. I recognize the loss. Right? Remember, like we spoke like in previous years on the model that was developed by Kubler-Ross, the psychologist, the 5 stages of grief. What's the first one? Yes, Ellen, denial. Thank you. Good to have a psychologist here. Yes, denial. So what happens if I don't sit Shiva? If I don't observe that stuff? I'm still in denial. I'm still in denial because I can start sitting Shiva only if I accept the loss. Right?
If you are denying something, you are accepting because it's a fact.
No, but that's the whole point of denial. Denial is that even if it's a fact, people don't accept it.
The understanding that I have about the word denial, if you need to deny something, then you have something in front of you that you are not accepting. So
that's denial. But that's denial. Look, denial is not something that is going to take, denial can take like a minute or two. But the point is, it changes from situation to situation, it changes from person to person. But the point is that stage of denial does not enable me to move on. If I already observe the customs, the practices of mourning, I'm sitting Shiva, I'm not wearing my shoes, I'm doing all that kind of stuff, it means that I have accepted that loss. Still painful, it's still painful, but I have accepted that I'm not in denial anymore. Okay, now, so if I don't do that, I'm still in that shock. If I'm not, I'm still in that shock, denial, and that's the strongest expression of the pain. Now, what is he talking about? He's talking about, it's the destruction of the temple and the death of their kids. It's something that they cannot even fathom. They cannot even comprehend. It's beyond description, beyond the words. And therefore, they cannot move on and start the process of grief. They can't do that because for that they need to first accept it. They're unable to accept it. And instead, the pasuk says, "Unhamtem ish el achiv." They're not even able to speak. They're that kind of stuff, moaning to each other. They're not even able to speak because such sorrow, such pain cannot be expressed in words. When you're in mourning, you move to the next stage of mourning. Part of the process is talking about it. People come to you. That's the whole purpose of Shiva. People come to you, you talk, blah, 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 whatever. That's part of the process. But they're in such shock. They're not even able to speak. Okay. Now, Pasuk of Zayin tells us ביום ההוא יבוא הפליט אליך להשמעות אוזניים, ביום ההוא יפתח פיך את הפליט ותדבר ולא תיעלם עוד, והיית להם למופת וידעו כי אני אדוני. Right? And you, I'm reading from 25, and you, son of man, behold, on the day that I take their stronghold from them, the joy of their glory, the darling of their eyes, and the exaltation of their soul, their sons and their daughters, on that day, a fugitive, the palit, will come to you to let your ears hear. On that day, your mouth will be opened with the fugitive's arrival, and you will speak and no longer be dumb. then you will be a sign to them, and they will know that I'm Hashem. On that day, the Palit, the fugitive, is going to come to the Golah, to Bavel, to tell them that the temple was destroyed. Now you got to understand, that happens when? Almost a year and a half after the Churban. 3 years after the beginning of the chapter. Okay? If you flip to chapter 33, look, chapter 33 for a second. Because here it's just like he's being told that that's going to happen. But when this is happening, that's happening 3 years later. Chapter 33, verses 21, 22. Okay? says, ויהי ב12 שנה בעשירי בחמישה לחודש לגלותנו, בא אליי הפליט מירושלים לאמור הוכתה העיר. On the 12th year, right, the fugitive came from Yerushalayim to tell me that the year was destroyed. But what happens in our chapter? When does it start? Bashana Hachiit, in the 9th year. We're right. Look at the first pasuk of Kaftalid, chapter 24, the first pasuk. Bashana Hachiit, b'chodesh ha'asiri, b'asor lachodesh. The 10th of the 10th month, on the 9th year. And what this is happening? The Palit is, the fugitive is coming on the 12th year. So that's 3 years later. So what happens during those 3 years? He's going to be silent. Well, technically no. No, it's already done. Like the temple was destroyed. It's destroyed. He's just like it takes 3 years for the travels to arrive. Correct. To mourn. So Yechzkel is going to be silent now for 3 years about the Jews. In the next couple of chapters, he's not going to talk about the Jews. He's going to talk about the other nations, though. So the next couple of chapters, there's 8 chapters, he's going to talk about the other nations. So either those prophecies were given during that time, and so when we learn that he was silent, is silent about the Jews, or that they're there, but actually they were given, and he was indeed silent about everybody. It's just that he gives the news later on. There's different opinions to look at that.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is the difference between Churban and Shoah?
There is no difference. Like if you, by the way, in the Haredi terminology, the Haredim don't use the word Shoah. They use the word Churban.
Because Churban is the word that's mentioned in the Bible, and Shoah
is also mentioned in the Bible. Shoah is also mentioned in the Bible.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think that this is? Who came with that word? Eliezer ben Yehuda? No. Eliezer ben Yehuda lived before the Shoah. We read that word. It's even in Yechzkel. It appears in several places in the Bible. Okay, so the question is, what is the silent is representing? If you remember, after the first prophecy, we've said after his first prophecy, he was not able to deliver more messages, and he's silent. Right? Look at this 3rd chapter. Because of that, he is commanded. God says, "Oh, you're silent. You don't want to say what I tell you to say. I'll show you what silence is." And he puts him really in silence. Okay, fine. Now that silence, this idea is in its more radical way. So the silence after losing his wife is going to be the most expressed, this is the biggest expression of the pain that the people are going to experience with the time of the destruction. It's like when there's nothing else to say, it's like it's beyond the words. It's just there's nothing to say.
Losing children.
That's what he tells them. You're going to lose your children.
That's maybe later on. He had to use a palit.
No, the palit comes 3 years later. The palit comes.
But time for me to get this.
Correct. So what's interesting is that at that point, things are so terrible, so difficult. There's a silver lining, and there's like a little bit of hope, and that's what completes that first half of the book. Look at we just read those psukim, 25 till the end. It says, on the day in which the palit, the fugitive, is going to bring that horrible news, on that day, a new period is starting in the life of Yechzkel. The silence is going to be over, and from that point, he'll be able to speak, but his message is going to be different. He's not going to talk anymore about the inevitable destruction, but rather he's going to start talking about the future redemption. He's going to talk about Bnei Israel, the Jews, coming back to Israel, to the rebuild of the temple, and all those topics that we're going to see at the end of the book. So what's interesting is that the prophet of the Churban, the prophet of the destruction, the prophet of pain, of tragedy, is transferring at this point into the prophet of hope and redemption.
That's why he said Mofet. This is a special one.
No, Mofet is not in the. You're looking in modern Hebrew. You're thinking modern Hebrew.
So what does it mean?
Mofet is a symbol. Vayay Yechzkel lachem leMofet is going to be a symbol. That's in biblical. That's what it means. Eliezer ben Yehuda had a little bit of a different take on that. Yeah, but that's Mofet is symbol. Okay. It's a sign. Yes, it's a sign. But in our terminology, we think something positive, something miraculous. That's not what he's talking about. It's a sign, symbol. Yes, Beth. You're muted, so I can't hear you.
Thank you. Sorry. The timeline again between when Yechzkel started prophesizing and when the temple was destroyed. Can you just do that one more time?
We said about 5 years.
So he started and
5,
then it
6
was
years.
Okay. Thank you.
5, 6 years. Yeah. Okay. So just a reminder, I'm away next week, and in 2 weeks from now, we're going to have July 4th. So we're not going to have a class as well. So we're off for we'll meet 3 weeks from today. Okay, the next 2 Tuesdays, we are off. Thank you. Yeah, traveling with 4 kids. Yay, on the plane, long flight. Yay.